Well, the Fever have indeed hit some hardship early in the WNBA season. Of course, Caitlin Clark going down was the number one cause of this, but then Sophie Cunningham and Sydney Colson suffer injuries in the last game, the loss against the Connecticut Sun, which opened up the Fever for an emergency hardship exception. If you had heard what Fever coach Stephanie White and team president Kelly Crosskopf said at practice yesterday, it was inevitable that the team was going to sign a player, and they did indeed do that, announcing Aari McDonald, former member of the Los Angeles Sparks, has been signed to the hardship exception. So basically that means the WNBA granted it for the Fever. The way this works is that if a team falls under 10 available players, they can apply for the hardship exception. That player then joins the team until the returning players or enough of the returning players come back so that the team can field 10 players or has 10 what you would call game eligible players available to get going and get on the floor. So in a sense, it's a bit of an opportunity for McDonald to showcase herself, and of course a chance for the Fever to add something in the backcourt. I see complaining online, which I never understand some of the complaining that's out there because, first of all, you get to this situation and you're not just having superstars sitting on the shelf. You're looking at the pool of available players from free agency, and it's also a temporary fix. But the options here are going to be players that were waived or cut or what have you, hadn't found their way in the WNBA. McDonald was the number 3 overall pick by the Atlanta Dream in 2021. She has certainly not lit the world on fire in her career thus far. But nonetheless, people were a little surprised when she, was cut by the Sparks before the season started. Her career averages are 8.6 points and 2.8 assists. She's a bit of an undersized guard, but nonetheless a proven professional, 4 years in the league. Last year, she averaged 8.7 points and 3.7 assists for the Sparks, of course. Here's some of, a look at some of her production from a season ago in Los Angeles. Here is McDonald. And you could see a dribble drive there into a pull-up. Definitely a bit undersized, but able to get a little bit into the teeth of the defense with that pass. Good entry pass there. And simply the Fever right now are devoid of players who can really do anything from the perimeter, a total lack of perimeter depth. So this is not a signing that is supposed to change the course of the season. By the way, this is against the Fever here. Good outlet pass from McDonald. So this is not a signing that is supposed to change the course of the season. This is a signing that is supposed to help them steady the ship in the meantime. And it's an opportunity for McDonald to sort of try out for a future team. I mean, Jaylen Brown, who was with the Fever, just signed with the Connecticut Sun for the rest of the year contract. So congratulations to her on landing a spot in the WNBA. And then as far as the rest of this, McDonald, by the way, is the player who went up to Clark after the second before the second free throw, before she even shot a second free throw last year, to sort of face guard her. Remember that thing went viral? That was a pretty funny situation when it took place. Here it was. I remember when this really blew up, but there she goes. That's how much attention is paid to Clark, and obviously how much the Fever miss her. And I think Clark said after the game she's really cool or something like that. So that's actually a sign. I take that as a good sign of someone who takes their responsibility seriously. And hopefully for the Fever, they did say that Cunningham and Colson are more day-to-day situations. And I think with Cunningham, that's very fortunate news. Colson, it almost sounded like could be ready for the game on Tuesday. And we're also approaching the time where we're going to get an update on Caitlin Clark as well. But just to take it full circle, here is what Fever president Kelly Crosskopf had said about this yesterday in regards to the emergency hardship situation.
We're down in numbers, but we're looking at adding another player for a replacement player to help us with our numbers and try to get people healthy and try to get a full roster back together. I mean, games are still coming, so it's going to be an adjustment, but we have a good group, we have good depth, thankfully, so that should help us.
Are you hoping to have that player before Tuesday's game?
We're hoping, yeah.
All right.
Have you ever been through any circumstance this early into the season and stuff where you're battling 3-4 down? Like how unique is it?
Remember, I don't, probably, but I mean, because the WNBA, the roster sizes are so much smaller. So when you get down to the 11-player roster and you lose 3 players like that, now you've got to add a quick player to your roster. So it's something that you just deal with being in this league with the roster sizes being a little bit smaller, and that's why you try to build for depth.
Is this maybe another perfect example of where the W, if they could get to where they had, like the NBA has 2 ways, but maybe home player development roles and they could be available in times like this? Would that be ideal?
I mean, just more bodies would be good. Yeah.
Cameron Brink had campaigned for larger roster sizes more than expansion teams, right? But this is Fever fans are always invested, which is great. McDonald is, I find it hard to argue with this signing, given the available pool of players and given the situation. It's not as if this was the number 1 pick in the draft that the Fever just made. This is not as if this was their big free agency signing. This was, as it says, an emergency hardship exception. So the Fever needed a body. They got somebody in the backcourt in the event that Colson, Clark, and Cunningham, or a combination of those players, is unavailable for a period of time. Somebody who can step in, and then maybe somebody who can step in for another team later in the season, or does a good job auditioning for the Fever for the future here. I mean, the reality of the WNBA is very brutal. So many of the draft picks don't actually make teams. And then obviously we saw how many players were cut and waived before the WNBA season actually started. And the Fever were flirting with that line just by having 11 readily available players in the first place on the team. So a couple go down, and all of a sudden you're in an emergency hardship situation, and that's where they found themselves. But it doesn't change the grand scheme or grand point of things, because all of this hinges on the return of Caitlin Clark. It doesn't take a genius to figure that out. It doesn't take a basketball savant to be able to connect those dots. But Cunningham and Colson seem like they're set to return fairly soon, given Stephanie White's comments. And we're due for an update on Caitlin. In the short, we're a week out of the announcement of 2 weeks. So if all goes well, it would stand to reason that the soonest she returns is for the game. I think they have a game next Tuesday. But regardless, I do believe we'll get an update on when she'll be back on the floor soon as well.